Most people have never thought with their own minds. They repeat inherited ideas. They react the way they were trained. They feel what the environment dictates. And they live inside narratives they have never questioned. You don't need chains to be controlled. All it takes is a distracted mind. All it takes is to believe that all the thoughts that arise in you are yours. All it takes is to live on autopilot and call it freedom. It's subtle, almost invisible, but deeply effective. Controlling a mind doesn't require oppression, just conditioning. And that's why your mind needs to become sacred ground, not accessible to any stimulus, any voice, any trend. This video is about becoming uncontrollable from within. Powerful mind doesn't scream. It notices, chooses, and when you rebuild your mind with awareness, no one else can enter it without your permission. Have you ever wondered who is thinking your thoughts? The real game doesn't happen in the news, in governments, or on social media. It happens in silence, inside your head. Every day, billions of impulses compete for your attention. You wake up and are already bombarded with ideas about what you should want, how you should feel, what you should worry about. And without realizing it, your mind becomes an occupied field, colonized by external voices. The collective mind works like a dense vibrational field, where thought patterns circulate like invisible viruses. And the less awareness you have of this, the more easily your energy is hijacked. Florence Scovel Shinn said, "Imagination is the gateway to reality. But if your imagination is being fed by fears, comparisons, and outside noise, what kind of reality are you creating?" The first step to building an uncontrollable mind is to recognize that there is a game being played. And it only works as long as you're playing it without knowing. Realizing this is like coming out of a trance. And every awakening begins with a simple choice: to observe your own thoughts as someone who watches over a temple. The mind, by itself, is not your enemy. It is soil, a fertile field. And like any field, it doesn't question what is planted, it simply makes it grow. If you plant fear, it multiplies it. If you plant presence, it expands it. The mind doesn't decide what enters, but it amplifies what you allow. And that's exactly why it can be both a portal and a prison. When we operate on autopilot, we let it feed on anything. Notifications, opinions, noise, ancestral patterns, unresolved traumas. And little by little, it closes in around us. And we begin to confuse conditioning with identity. But when you take on the role of conscious gardener of your mind, everything changes. You start to choose what you think, not by force, but by frequency. You realize that thinking is not reacting, it is planting. And that one thought chosen with intention is worth more than 1,000 unconscious reactions. Nikola Tesla said, "If you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. The mind is the first point of transmission. What you think sends out a frequency, and what you cultivate mentally, you attract vibrationally. That's why a powerful mind is not full. It is clean. It is rooted in silence. Is your mind cultivating what sets you free, or trapping you in what keeps you asleep? Much of what you call me was taught, repeated, conditioned. Since childhood, you've been programmed to fit in, to please, obey, compete, compare yourself, adapt. And over time, these programs turned into internal voices that you began to call your personality. But how many of your beliefs truly came from your direct experience, and not from repeated messages from others? How many times have you denied yourself just to maintain a sense of belonging? How many thoughts you call your own are actually echoes from another mind? The programmed mind lives in a maze. It goes in circles, always trying to solve problems it created itself. It lives on the defensive, always ready to react. And the worst part, it believes this is freedom. Deconstructing this programmed self is not about destroying your mind. It's about freeing it. It's about starting to observe thoughts like watching a river, without drowning in them, just noticing the flow. It's about recognizing when the voice speaking inside you is not your soul, but a repetition from the past. And that's when something deep begins to happen. You stop living under command and start living in coherence. You begin to think with presence, feel with truth, and act with roots. This is the shift from the programmed self to the present self. And a present mind no longer needs to prove anything to the world. It simply is. There is a place within you where nothing is missing. It's not a place of euphoria or mental excitement. It's a quiet, untouched space where everything simply is. But to access it, you must overcome the deepest addiction of the modern mind: noise. Noise from unnecessary thoughts, from others' opinions, from urgencies that aren't yours. Control happens when your mind is full. In inner silence, you don't become empty. You become whole, because you can finally hear what has always been trying to speak to you: your intuition, your higher consciousness, your true self. Alan Watts said that silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of meaning. And that's exactly it. In silence, you don't escape life. You enter into communion with it. This silence doesn't require a cave or isolation. It can happen in the middle of chaos, as long as there is clarity within you. Because the silence that sets you free is not external, it's mental. It's the point where thoughts stop shouting, and your energy stops scattering. In that state, no one can push you around with words, triggers, or opinions, because your mind no longer responds to what is superficial. It responds to what is essential. And when that happens, power returns as vibrational sovereignty. Thinking by itself is not the problem. Thinking without awareness is. Most people don't think, they just react. They repeat patterns, worries, comparisons. They live in mental cycles that drain energy without ever producing clarity. But there is another way to use the mind: thinking with intention and vibration. In other words, thinking like someone who plants, not someone who defends. Like someone who directs energy. Neville Goddard taught, "You become what you imagine to be true." That means what you hold as a vibrational focus in your mind begins to become part of your reality. A thought fueled by intention becomes a frequency, and that frequency begins to shape everything: your perception, your emotions, your actions, and even what you attract. That's why it's not just about thinking positive. It's about thinking with energetic presence, with vibrational alignment. It's about choosing your thoughts like someone choosing a direction, not like someone running from fear. When you think with intention, your mind becomes a channel, a transmitter of reality, and you stop being an echo of the world to become a conscious cause within it. That is the true art of thinking: not to be right, not to please, but to create. You don't need to isolate yourself from the world to be protected. But you do need to decide what your mind allows in. Mental protection is not resistance. It is energetic sovereignty. It is knowing where the other ends and where you begin. We live in a collective field where emotions, beliefs, and intentions are constantly circulating. And without awareness, your mind can absorb everything, like a vibrational sponge. Tiredness that isn't yours. Anxiety that didn't start with you. Ideas you didn't even realize you accepted. That's why protecting the mind isn't about closing off. It's about strengthening your field. It's about filtering thoughts with awareness. It's about shielding yourself without becoming hard. A protected mind has discernment. It recognizes emotional noise disguised as truth. It senses when something comes to manipulate, to confuse, to drain. And instead of reacting, it doesn't connect. It observes and lets it pass. True protection begins when you stop trying to please everyone. When you stop accepting everything as normal. When you become so familiar with your silence that you can immediately recognize anything that tries to break it. You can be in the middle of a crowd and still keep your mind intact, inaccessible, clear, aligned, like sacred ground where only what vibrates in truth is allowed in. A powerful mind is not the one that calculates everything. It's the one aligned with the heart. because the heart doesn't just feel, it knows. The true leap in consciousness happens when the mind submits to the heart, not as weak submission but as elevated integration. The heart is the center of coherence. It is where vibration, intention, and perception align. Modern neuroscience studies have already confirmed. The heart has its own electromagnetic field, larger and more powerful than the brain's. But mystics and sages have known this for millennia. Lao Tzu said, "Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is wisdom, but feeling yourself deeply is transcendence." When you think with the heart, your decisions gain a different quality. And this revelation is always clean, clear, and vibrationally precise. The heart doesn't make mistakes because it doesn't judge. It feels the truth even when the mind still doubts. And when your mind surrenders to the wisdom of the heart, a kind of power is born that doesn't impose, but transforms. This is the awakened mind, one that thinks with clarity, but vibrates with love. And because of that, it becomes impossible to manipulate. An awakened mind is not defined by labels, not limited by social narratives, not shaped by manufactured standards. It observes, perceives, chooses, and adapts without losing itself. This mind doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't respond to low provocations, doesn't seek constant approval, doesn't get distracted by the surface. It operates from an inner place where clarity is natural. And for that very reason, it becomes uncontrollable. Because no one can manipulate someone who knows themselves. No one controls a being who thinks with intention, feels with clarity, and lives with presence. The system doesn't know what to do with someone like that, because that person doesn't follow a script. They write their own reality from within, and don't repeat the one that was sold to them. This is the awakened mind. It transcends its frequency. Building a powerful mind is not about strength. It's about awareness, about stepping out of the noise, returning to the center, and remembering who thinks in you when you are silent. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who observes. And when your mind becomes yours again, nothing controls you anymore. If this message touched you in any way, like, comment, and share this video. Feel free to subscribe to the channel and follow the content. And remember, the mind that awakens changes the world. But first, it changes itself.